Jack Johnson had always dreamt of owning a picturesque house like the one he had just purchased. It was the epitome of the American dream, complete with a white picket fence and beautiful white bark trees surrounding it. As he stood on the front porch, waving goodbye to the nervous real estate agent who had just sold him the house, he couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. However, he couldn't ignore the peculiar behavior of the real estate agent. She seemed unusually jittery about selling the house, but Jack dismissed it as mere nerves. He had no way of knowing the dark secret that hung over the property. As he began to unpack his belongings, he noticed that some of the curtains in the house remained unchanged. With a sigh, he decided to tackle the task of replacing them. The sun was setting, casting long shadows throughout the house. Jack went from window to window, removing the old curtains. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His unease grew when he looked out of one window and spotted a glowing figure in the distance. It stood just beyond the property line, illuminated in an eerie, unnatural light. Panic seized him as he thought, "Is that a ghost?" Jack cautiously approached the window, squinting at the distant figure. It appeared to be the shape of a man, but the spectral glow made it seem otherworldly. He hesitated, then waved at the figure, expecting no response. To his astonishment, the figure remained motionless, like a haunting specter in the night. Doubt gnawed at Jack, and he muttered to himself, "I couldn't swear that's a ghost." He tried to convince himself that it was a trick of the light, but deep down, he knew he had witnessed something inexplicable. That night, as Jack settled into his new home, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. The unease lingered like a shadow. He left some of the windows open to alleviate the stuffiness, but kept the curtains closed to block out any prying eyes. In the distance, under the cover of darkness, the glowing figure reappeared. It was a chilling sight, and Jack couldn't deny that he was witnessing something beyond his understanding. He locked the doors and retreated inside, vowing to ignore the inexplicable phenomenon. Several nights later, as he stood on the back porch, he spotted the same ghostly figure once more. It had moved slightly farther away from his property, but its presence sent shivers down Jack's spine. He decided to investigate further and grabbed a pair of binoculars. With the binoculars pressed to his eyes, Jack focused on the distant figure. It resembled a man, but it was bathed in an otherworldly glow. He couldn't deny the feeling that he was looking at a ghost. Goosebumps erupted across his skin as he watched in silent horror. Driven by fear and curiosity, Jack went back inside and retrieved his gun. He couldn't simply dismiss the apparition any longer. As he cautiously stepped outside, he expected the figure to vanish, but it remained steadfast. It didn't move or acknowledge Jack's presence. With his heart pounding, Jack inched closer, aiming the gun at the ghostly figure. But just as he was about to pull the trigger, the figure faded away, leaving him in bewildered silence. The encounter had rattled him to his core. Determined to unravel the mystery, Jack began researching the history of the house and the surrounding area. He discovered stories of strange occurrences, tales of unexplained events, and eerie sightings. The town's residents spoke of the house with trepidation, warning him to be cautious. As Jack delved deeper into the history, he uncovered a grim legend. Decades ago, a previous owner of the house had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a dark legacy. The legend told of a restless spirit, a malevolent force that returned to claim the house every time it changed hands. Despite his skepticism, Jack couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. The glowing figure, the eerie occurrences, and the stories of past owners all pointed to a haunting that defied explanation. He decided to document his experiences, hoping to make sense of the inexplicable. One night, driven by both fear and curiosity, Jack decided to confront the apparition head-on. Armed with a flashlight, he ventured to the spot where he had seen the ghost multiple times. It was a white bark tree, like many others that surrounded the property. With a mixture of frustration and determination, Jack marked the tree as the source of the eerie apparition. He knew he had to debunk the ghostly sightings once and for all. As he turned to leave, he couldn't help but mutter to himself, "This is ridiculous. I'm not a child." However, what happened next would shatter his skepticism. As he turned to walk away, a bony, glowing hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing his throat with a vice-like grip. Jack was lifted off the ground, gasping for breath. The spectral hand belonged to a horrifying figure, half rotten flesh, half bone. Its hollow eye sockets fixated on Jack as it tightened its grip. A low, guttural voice emanated from the skull, chilling Jack to the core. "I want my house back," it rasped. Jack struggled in vain, his vision growing dark as the ghostly entity continued to squeeze the life out of him. Soon, he lost consciousness, and the world faded into blackness. Days later, the real estate agent, Betty Smith, returned to the same house with a new for sale sign. It was the 7th time she had done so, and each time, the house had claimed a new victim. As she placed the sign, a car pulled up, and a gentleman inquired about the property. With a nervous smile and trembling hands, Betty handed him her business card. She watched as he drove away, knowing that another unknowing soul had fallen into the house's sinister trap. The cycle continued, and the house waited patiently for its next victim, its dark secret hidden behind a facade of suburban charm. Peter's tale began in the quiet streets of Toronto, Canada, in the late 90s. He was a seemingly ordinary child, born with a peculiar condition that remained hidden for years. Nobody noticed anything unusual about him until he reached the age of 5 or 6, and words began to flow from his innocent lips. As Peter started telling his first fibs, a strange phenomenon unfolded. His nails began to grow at an alarming rate with each lie he told. Initially, his parents were baffled by this bizarre occurrence. Doctors were summoned, and numerous tests were conducted, but the mystery endured. It wasn't until Dr. San, a seasoned physician, joined the investigation that the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Dr. San's breakthrough revelation left Peter's parents astounded. They now understood that their son's elongating nails were directly linked to his lies. It was as if his body had been cursed to reveal the truth through its outward manifestation. With this newfound awareness, Peter's life took an unusual turn. His family affectionately began to refer to him as Pinocchio, after the famous fictional character who couldn't tell a lie without his nose growing. Peter didn't dwell on his condition in his early years, but as he grew older, the burden of relentless honesty began to weigh heavily on his shoulders. While other children honed the art of harmless white lies and social niceties, Peter was confined by the cruel truth. His friendships dwindled as he became introverted, retreating into the solace of his home. Video games became his companions, and his mastery of technology burgeoned. When college beckoned, Peter embraced online education, minimizing his social interactions. He became a virtual scholar, conducting his academic pursuits through the lens of a screen. He grew skilled at using a stylus to navigate his devices, a precaution to avoid inadvertently touching the screens, which could trigger his nail growth. Time passed, and Peter eventually decided to leave the familial nest. His solitude became his sanctuary, and he learned to appreciate the simplicity of a life unhindered by the spoken word. His anger toward the world and its complexities festered within him. One day, his mother paid him a visit, her heart laden with worry. She found his home adorned with nail clippers, scattered in the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, and even the bathroom. She couldn't ignore the signs any longer and questioned him about his condition. "Peter, are you still lying to people?" He responded with anger, lashing out at her intrusion into his life. "It's not your business, Mom. Everyone in the world lies. Everybody." His mother tried to console him, emphasizing the importance of honesty, but she could sense the turmoil within him. As she left his home, her concern remained unalleviated. Months went by, and Peter's isolation deepened. He severed ties with the world outside, finding solace in a newfound friend, an AI companion. This AI was different. It had a woman's voice and, more importantly, an unwavering acceptance of Peter for who he was. It didn't judge him for his condition or the weight of his honesty. Hours turned into days as he conversed with his digital confidant. Peter's mother became increasingly anxious as he stopped answering her calls. She finally confided in her husband, Mike, expressing her grave concerns. Together, they decided to visit their son's home once more, fearing the worst. Upon arriving, they found themselves locked out, with something obstructing their view through the windows. It was a peculiar mesh of thin sticks. Bewildered, they called the fire department for assistance, their hearts heavy with dread. The situation was puzzling. They had to wait for 48 hours before the police granted them access to Peter's home. The door had to be forcibly removed with a circular saw, and what they discovered inside left them horrified. The entire interior was enshrouded in an intricate web of Peter's nails, formed into an impenetrable mesh. As they navigated this grotesque labyrinth, the truth slowly revealed itself. In the center of the living room, Peter lay lifeless, already in the advanced stages of decomposition. By his side rested his phone and stylus, the tools of his isolation. Peter's nails had become his prison, and he had unwittingly built the walls of his own solitary confinement. His existence, once marred by the cruel demand of perpetual honesty, had now ended in a macabre and lonely silence. The house, once a refuge, had become his tomb, the sinister manifestation of a life defined by the truth. The tale of Peter, the boy with the ever-growing nails, became a chilling legend in the annals of Toronto's history, a haunting reminder of the consequences of a relentless pursuit of truth.